If we look at vocabulary growth, I've taken a picture from one particular study where vocabulary growth in Dutch was investigated by speakers of L1 Turkish. And this picture, I think, is very typical of what happens. So when you have the vocabulary increasing quite a lot in the L2 speakers, the Turkish L1 speakers of Dutch, the vocabulary of the first language speakers is, of course, also increasing, who are the speakers who are at the same age. And this means that the gap, which one would hope to converge, or where the development converges, doesn't do so. In many studies it has been seen that the gap remains like this. If we look at something different now, there is a conflict between the individuals, the second language, additional language learners' knowledge of the world and available linguistic resources. What I mean by that is that speakers would be able to express in their first language a number of things of the world, so they can think of features of the world and then feel that I don't have the linguistic resources in my second language so that I can speak about these things. So what to do in that situation? What research has looked at are simplification strategies. How do you express something when your linguistic resources fail? So what you use is such things as non-specific vocabulary. You don't know the precise words, so you use thing for many different objects. You might use water for things like lake, river. You would use talk for things like speak, chat, converse, negotiate. You wouldn't have that large variability in your vocabulary and flexibility in your vocabulary, so you would rather use something less specific. And in the same way, you would use non-elaborated grammar, present verb forms for past, for example, lack of embedding and subordination, lack of modifiers, and so on. So you would try to convey the information or to talk about what you want to talk about with a less developed system. So that would be what simplification strategies are. And then, of course, there is often a conflict between the first language and the second additional language linguistic categories. And that is something that we really know, and that was something that prior to the interlanguage perspective, people thought was the whole story. I mean, the differences between two languages is what make up the difficulties. So, but that has to do, of course, that if your own language has a certain phonological system that doesn't fit the second language, then you would rather use your categories from the first language, and they would come up as accent in the second language, and the same thing in at the other levels. What has been less talked about maybe is discourse and pragmatics in that sense, and those aspects. I mean, how you organize what you are saying or organize your talk, and in what situations you use what expressions. These are very unconscious for speakers. You learn them early in life. Before, most of it is learned already before you are 6-7 years, and then nobody talks about it. You just know how you do these things, and they are very easily transferred into whatever language you learn or you speak. So these are aspects that one could focus upon to quite much more than usually is focused upon in teaching. Metalinguistic awareness I call this second language, additional language advantage, because it looks like second language users become more used to seeing different languages and think about how these languages are structured, or what happens in each language. So when you get attuned to that, you may think about what you are, what your learning task is from a metalinguistic perspective. So, and I would say the second language, additional language users have an advantage there. They can do this easier in many cases than monolingual speakers. But at the same time, it's obvious that learners don't notice all the differences that there are between their first language and their second language, and because of that they need support to detect what the differences are. And what I mean here is that they can use such support because they have themselves to some extent thought about that there are differences. So learners can use metalinguistic information in their own handling of language. And here I would like to point to an area in research that has been called focus on form. And that is in distinction to focus on forms, and in distinction to focus on content. So there are three perspectives here. One is focus on form, another one is focus on forms, and one is focus on content. And with focus on form is meant that learners seem to be able to use discussions about linguistic form, but not like it was used in the traditional grammar teaching, that you take up paradigms of nouns and verbs and talk about different things. That is focus on forms. Focus on form is to interact with the learner about the forms of language that learner himself or herself uses, and discuss this. So you say this, and or how do you think that this should be expressed, and how do you feel that your peers express this and that, so that you take it from the situation and discuss linguistic form from that perspective. And in research on this, it has been seen that focus on form leads to better performance than both focus on meaning and focus on form. Focus on meaning is the more communicative use of language only, which has the result that it's difficult for learners to detect the form differences. And focusing on forms is the traditional teaching of linguistic of grammar to children, which doesn't seem to help that much. So traditional teaching with focus on grammar can result in limited fluency, and communicative approaches focus on content tend to produce fluency with less accuracy.